In this video, I'm going to be discussing 10 common wine mistakes. The first mistake I see quite frequently is serving red wines too warm and white wines too cold. Proper serving temperature is absolutely critical to enjoy the wines. When a white wine is served too cold, the flavors and the aromas are muted and you miss out on the experience. Similarly, when a red wine is too warm, it can have a hot finish and the alcohol becomes too pronounced, and you also don't enjoy it that way. And while you've oftentimes heard of red wine being served at room temperature, that doesn't mean room temperature when it's 80 degrees or so. The appropriate temperature for a red wine would be more in the 60 to 65 degree range, and for white wines it's going to be more like 43 to 50 degrees. And so what that means is in some instances you might have to chill a red wine down. You could do that by putting it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes before you're ready to open it. With white wines, you may need to do the opposite. You may need to remove it from the refrigerator for about 30 minutes, so it gets to be about 43 to 50 degrees, depending on the type of wine that it is. And if you're at a restaurant and the red wine is too warm, don't hesitate to ask for an ice bucket so you can chill that down. They should know enough to have the wine served at the correct temperature, but to the extent they don't, there's certainly no harm in getting it chilled and getting it the way that it should be. The second mistake I see far too frequently, even by some who have been drinking wine for many years, is that they tend to generalize and not keep an open mind. For example, they may say, oh, I don't drink Riesling because I don't like sweet wines. Or they may say, I'm not drinking Merlot. Of course, two of the best wines in the entire world, Petrus and Macedo, are 100% Merlot. And so people who don't drink Merlot are missing out potentially on some of the best wines ever made. Similarly, Riesling is not always sweet. There's many outstanding dry Rieslings from Austria, Germany, and from Alsace, France. And better still, those wines are priced fairly attractively and they're also incredibly food friendly. So especially at restaurants, they're an excellent choice and they go very, very well with a number of foods. And you can also get them at prices that are much more friendly than things like white Burgundy or champagne, for example. And if you would ask many sommeliers what their favorite wines are, you would oftentimes hear Riesling mentioned certainly in their top 5. Similarly, just because something's a Pinot Noir or a Cabernet doesn't mean it's good. There's many instances where Pinot Noir producers have yields that are way too high, and the result is wines that are thin and uninspiring and just aren't very good. Beware of generalization. Make sure you keep an open mind and evaluate each wine on its merits. There's both good and bad wines from every single region in the world, so it's best not to just generalize and write certain wines off. The third wine mistake that I see people make is to put wine in their trunk when they're leaving the wine shop or when they're otherwise transporting the wine. This is especially problematic in places like Texas and Florida, where it gets warm in the summer. It wouldn't take very long for that wine to get cooked and to be ruined. And so it's especially important whenever the temperatures are more than 60 degrees, make sure you put it in the back seat or somewhere inside the vehicle where it can stay cool and get access to the air conditioning. The fourth mistake that I see people making is at restaurants, they will smell the cork to try to identify whether or not the wine is flawed. Waiters in many instances don't help with this by presenting it to you as if it's the appropriate way to make that analysis. It's simply not. There's not much you can tell by smelling the cork. If there's any flaws in the wine, that will be identified by smelling the wine itself. And in fact, in many instances, I can tell whether or not a wine is sound just by smelling it, and the tasting is completely unnecessary. If you're unsure what to look for to determine whether a wine has a flaw or not, I did another video on that, which can help you out in that regard. The fifth wine mistake that I see quite frequently is using an ice bucket to chill a wine, but only having ice in it. If you want to really chill the wine down quickly, don't just put ice in it. Put a mixture of both ice and water, maybe about a 50-50 mixture. If you do that, it's going to chill the wine down much faster than if you just have ice alone. The sixth wine mistake that I see people making is that they don't check their glass before the wine is poured in it. Many times there could be a soapy residue or otherwise a foul smell in your glass. And if you let the wine get poured in there before you check the glass, it could ruin the entire experience. So always be sure to check the wine glass and smell the wine glass before the wine is poured in it. The seventh mistake that I see people making is to not store their wine properly. If this is a wine that you're not going to be drinking in the near term, it's important to make sure that you keep it in a cool, dark place so that it doesn't get damaged either by too much light or by too much heat. It's never a good idea to put the bottle of wine on top of your refrigerator because refrigerators ventilate through the top and it can be very, very hot there. And plus hot air rises, and that's near the top of the room anyway. And in fact, the kitchen generally is a bad place for wine, since that's typically a warmer room due to the oven being on and all the cooking and so forth that goes on. You can keep it in the refrigerator, but only if you're going to be drinking the wine within a few months or so. If you keep it in the refrigerator longer than that, the cork could dry out and it could get oxidized. For those of you who have basements, that's a great place to keep the wine if you don't have a proper wine fridge, or otherwise you could use probably a closet or maybe a little room under the staircase if you have one of those. The eighth mistake that I see people making is to get stressed out over what to order at restaurants or to spend way too much time poring over the list trying to make a decision. What I recommend is that you just have a couple wines that you know that you enjoy and that you're prepared to identify those wines for the sommelier or the waiter. And if you give them a couple wines that you like and that you enjoy on a regular basis, they'll be able to take that information and then use it to make some informed recommendations for you. For example, they'll probably try to find out if you like white or red, if you like dry wines or sweet wines, full-bodied or light-bodied, that sort of thing. And that will make the whole process much easier, and you won't need to either spend a long time studying the list or getting stressed out. The ninth mistake that I see people making is ordering the wine pairings when they go out to a dinner where they have proposed wine pairings to go with a meal. These are typically not the best value and not the best use of your money. What I like to do is take that money and use it to buy bottles of wine and make my own pairings. For example, if you have a party of 4 and the wine pairings are $50 a piece, you could then use that $200 and buy bottles of wine with it. Perhaps getting a half bottle or 2 for the earlier courses and then getting a red wine for the entrees. By doing this, you'll most likely get better quality wine, and you'll certainly get a lot more wine than you would if you purchased the wine pairings. The 10th mistake that I sometimes see people making is holding the wine glass by the bowl rather than the stem. If you hold the glass by the bowl, you're going to be warming up the wine, and then before you know it, it's not going to be the right temperature. It also doesn't look nearly as good as holding it by the stem. For this reason, I typically don't even use the stemless wine glasses that were in vogue a couple years ago. So make sure you hold those wine glasses by the stem. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please smash that like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss the next one. I come out with weekly wine videos. Until next time, drink well.